If only there were a single way to define the value of your project. But there isn't. So, in this video, I'll show you some of your options. To start with, there isn't even a single way to define value mathematically. As I explained in my video, What is Value? However, to summarize, mathematically, the first way that we can define value is as the difference between the benefit and the cost. Value equals total benefit minus total cost, which is also sometimes known as the net benefit. This, by the way, is how the Project Management Institute defines value in its Guide to the Project Management Body of Knowledge. The alternative mathematical formulation is as a ratio. Value is the total benefit divided by the total cost. That is the benefit to cost ratio. And this is the way that the Association for Project Management, the APM, defines value in its APM body of knowledge. We can combine both of these approaches using a mathematical formula that is widely favoured by finance professionals. It gives us a formula for what is known as return on investment, ROI, which is calculated as the net benefit divided by the total cost. That is, the total benefit minus the total cost, all divided by the total cost. ROI is a more reliable way to calculate the value of a project, but there are more approaches that we can take. The most sophisticated approach to valuing a project is to use a discounted cash flow. This is a sophisticated approach, so I have made a full video on that, on how to calculate a discounted cash flow, and I'll put a link to that in the description. What makes discounted cash flows particularly robust is that they take proper account of the time value of money. That is to say, would you prefer if I gave you $1,000 today, or I promised to give you $1,000 in 2 years' time? Now, clearly, $1,000 today is usually worth more than $1,000 in 2 years' time, because you can put that money to work and it can earn interest or a yield on an investment. Discounted cash flows take full advantage of that by working with a discount rate, which accounts for both the notional interest rate that you can get on that investment, but also removing from that rate the effects of an assumed inflation rate. There are two measures that a discounted cash flow produces that represent the value of a project. These are the NPV, or net present value, and the IRR, or internal rate of return. Net present value, or NPV, is the total value in today's money of all the inflows and outflows of cash associated with the project and the life cycle of what you produce. The inflows are the revenue that it generates, or the savings that it makes, and the outflows are the costs that it incurs, both the capital costs of doing the project and the revenue costs of running the life of the asset you produce. Each of these cash flows in or out is then discounted by a factor that accounts for the time value. And when you add all of these up, you get the net present value. A net present value of greater than zero represents a project that delivers a positive return for its investors. Clearly, the bigger the net present value, the greater the value of a project. The other thing to note is that a project is only going to be worthwhile if the net present value is not only greater than zero, but greater by a sufficient margin to make it worthwhile taking the risks that the project will incur. The internal rate of return, or IRR, is the discount rate that one would need to apply to create a net present value of 0 for your project. We compare the internal rate of return with a notional return that one could get on an investment. Clearly, if the internal rate of return is greater than the return that the organisation could get from other ways of investing its money, then the project looks like a good investment. And the higher the IRR, the better. Once again, we need to account for risk separately because the IRR calculation does not account for it. So, your IRR has to be big enough to account for the greater risk that a project incurs than other forms of investment. A simpler rate of return calculation is the accounting rate of return, or ARR. For this, we calculate the value of a project by dividing the annual income from the project by the total cost of doing the project. This has no consideration for the time value of money. But let's look at a simple example. Let's consider a project with a one-off, possibly capital cost of $1.2 million. It produces an asset that generates an annual revenue of $450,000, and the running cost of that is $400,000 a year. Therefore, the net income is $450,000 minus $400,000. That is $50,000. So we calculate the ARR as 50,000 divided by 1.2 million to give us an ARR of 4.17%. A simpler approach to calculating project value than any of these is to calculate the payback period, how long it takes the project to pay back the initial investment. We can calculate a simple payback, which takes the cash values of the money the project generates and the investment cost, or a discounted payback, where we calculate the payback period using the discounted amounts. The payback period measures the amount of time it takes to recoup our investment, and for the accumulated benefits to exceed the costs we've incurred. Everything I've talked about so far is based on the tangible outcomes and costs that we can represent in monetary terms. But there are other costs and other benefits that can't easily be rendered into monetary terms, but that doesn't make them any less important. These are things like perceptions, reputation, and morale. And what about things like beauty, ethics, and well-being? Are they any less important than financial measures? Not really. But despite this, we simply don't have any robust methods to evaluate them. Intangible literally means untouchable or hard to hold, so I suppose that this isn't surprising. But it is concerning that we have no other mechanism other than human judgment to properly evaluate the value of a project in any other terms than monetary. Please do give this video a like if you've enjoyed it or learned from it. I'll be making loads more great project management videos for you, so please do subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss them. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the next one.